I realized I needed to go to the birthplace of this sport, the United States. When I finished Unbound Gravel for the first time, I didn't want to do it again. It's a masochistic thing to ride such races. If you're pushing closer to 10 hours and more of physical exertion, the situation with consumption changes significantly. And everyone who wanted to improve their results ended up worse by 1 to 1.5 hours. I used 3mm handlebar tape, a road racing saddle, air pump and 4 CO2 cartridges, spare tubes, a set of keys, tire lever, a couple of gels. The entire transmission was getting clogged up. People were ripping off their rear derailleurs. Frames were breaking, hangers were snapping, and everyone was suffering from the mud. When you look at the chain, and it's shining like a mirror, I saw people sitting on the sidelines. Probably some had heat strokes. The first checkpoint was at the 127th kilometer, and the next one was at the 200th kilometer. Through suffering, you also experience enjoyment.
Hi, this video is about the Unbound Gravel race, and we're talking with Viktor Petrovych, a finisher of this race. So, you've raced this event twice.
Yes, in the 2021 and 2023. This is my prize for winning the 23rd year race. I won in the 55-59 age category and placed 49th overall.
Tell me about the experience and knowledge you had at the time of participating in Unbound Gravel.
Overall, I started cycling at the age of 13.
So you've been riding all your life, right?
Yes, I've been riding almost all my life, with small breaks for military service, education, getting into business, but almost all my life. 5 to 6 years ago, I noticed gravel cycling, which started to develop rapidly in the United States and now in Europe too. European gravel races are more similar to cross-country marathons in essence, in terms of trail length and terrain. They are more extreme in terms of trail difficulty and shorter in distance. They also involve other types of roads because in Europe it's a mix of forest, single tracks and asphalt roads. I realized I needed to go to the birthplace of this sport, the United States, and try out what real American gravel races look like. I found such a race in 2019. It was called Gravel Worlds and had been running for 10 years by then. One of the oldest races. It takes place in the state of Nebraska. The distance of this race is 150 miles, approximately 240 kilometers. I decided then that this would be my first race where I would challenge myself.
So you rode gravel for about a year?
No, I hadn't ridden. I just decided that I wanted to. And then I started thinking about what I wanted to ride and how I wanted to ride. Then I got a gravel bike and I started preparing for this race. And in August 2019, I went to America for this race. But before that, I decided that I needed to find something shorter. I found another race near Nebraska in the state of Chicago. It was shorter, 100 kilometers. A local race, but a real gravel race on gravel without asphalt. I rode this race and finished third overall. It inspired me a bit for the next race. A week later, I participated in the Gravel Worlds race, and I finished 36th overall and 5th in my age group. When I crossed the finish line, I said it was the toughest race of my life. If someone told me, "You're mistaken, you have to ride another 2 kilometers," I would have said, "I won't go." I had enough to make it to the finish line, and that's it. At that time, my age category was 50, 54 years old. It was a decent result, but I wanted something more, to make it onto the podium. So, the following year, I aimed for a tougher challenge, Unbound Gravel. At that time, it was called Dirty Kanza, and from the following year, when I participated, it was called Unbound Gravel. In 2021, I competed in the 50-54 age category. Unexpectedly for myself, I secured third place in this category and 45th place overall, which surprised me. It was my first such long and challenging race in life. For 2 consecutive years, the race took place in the northern direction, and then, for 2 consecutive years, in the southern direction. In 2021, I participated in the race in the northern direction, and in 2023, the race was supposed to take place in the southern direction. Therefore, due to the new route and new age group, I wanted to challenge myself again in this race. There were also some ambitions left, as in the 21st year I took third place and wanted to improve my result.
And what about the training? What did the preparation involve?
Well, I didn't change much in my training from my road program because my metabolism was fine. I had tried many different diets in the past and found what works best for my body. I can go for a long time without carbohydrate fueling, which is very beneficial in endurance races, especially in gravel cycling. Nutrition discipline is a crucial part of all endurance sports, and in such long races, it's a critically important aspect. If you eat incorrectly or at the wrong time or with the wrong nutrients, you simply won't finish the race.
So you adopted the nutrition strategy from your past experience?
Yes, from past experience, I wasn't too worried about it. I mean, I was concerned, but not overly afraid, because I knew what needed to be done. As for the training and physical load, I added more long-distance training sessions. I train in cycles, 3 weeks of training and 1 week of recovery. At the end of the third week of training, I increased the distance to 250-270 kilometers in one session.
Is each cycle the same?
The training volume and intensity increased. For example, in the first week, I didn't taper off on Sunday, but on Saturday, because the race took place on a Saturday. So I structured the training cycle so that the most intense training session was on Saturday. This way, my body would get used to working hard on Saturdays. And on Saturdays, the training volume increased, and by the end of the third week, it reached a point that was no more than 75% of the competitive distance. So I calculated that if I needed to ride 330 kilometers, then 250-270 kilometers would be enough to be in good shape.
Did you train on the road or gravel?
I trained on the road only.
Did you work with a coach?
No, I didn't. I trained by myself because I have a lot of experience in road cycling. At one point, I did train with coaches, but then I decided to stop using their services. I realized that nobody knows me better than myself. I already knew some methodologies that I had tried on myself. I knew what worked for me and what didn't. Based on my own experience, I developed training plans for myself.
Did you draw any conclusions from the first race in 2021? Was there a thought that this is how I rode the race, and next time I'll change something?
When I finished Unbound Gravel for the first time, I didn't want to do it again. But that feeling lasts for 2 to 3 weeks, and then you want to participate again. The romance of this race and this sport, in general, leaves such an impression that you want to dive back into it. It's a masochistic thing to ride such races. It's one thing when you ride for 10-12 hours, but there are people who ride for 20 hours for the same distance. Obviously, I found some weak points and moments that I wanted to improve next time, and this mostly concerned nutrition. If you're riding for 7, 8, 9 hours, it's one thing. But if you're pushing closer to 10 hours and more of physical exertion, the situation with consumption changes significantly. Your body just can't eat regular sports nutrition. It doesn't want anything sweet. It wants pizza, apples, pastries, regular food. You just count calories, but you don't pay attention to what those calories contain. In terms of the correctness of nutrition, you no longer monitor, you just consume the required amount of calories. My strategy for this year's Unbound Gravel was to consume 100 grams of carbohydrates per hour. This included fluids in bottles as well as gels, bars, and dried fruits.
Did you make stops? Did you pick up any food along the way?
Yes. At Unbound Gravel, there are 2 official checkpoints that are not mandatory, but everyone uses them. And at these checkpoints, depending on who is serving you, they are the only places where you can receive assistance from third parties.
What was the strategy at the checkpoints?
I understood how to use them from the first race. First of all, at the checkpoints, you can repair your bike. And in terms of food, you don't have to carry everything for the entire distance. You can spread out all the food and drinks so that you arrive almost empty at the checkpoint with a lighter bike. There, you load up, eat something, and then continue to the next checkpoint.
And for the 200-mile race, were there 2 checkpoints?
This year, the first checkpoint was very far, at the 127th kilometer. And in the conditions we had, it took about 4 to 5 hours to reach it. And the next one was at the 200th kilometer. I booked a checkpoint with the organizers. They offer such a service. It's paid. A large number of people meet you. There are tents with a variety of food and drinks, both sports-related and regular. For example, sandwiches, water, ice, soda, beverages. They wash your bike for you and help with lubrication. You give the organizers 2 bags a day or 2 before the race, one for the first checkpoint and one for the second. And you pack everything you think you'll need at these checkpoints, considering what you want to change or add in terms of food, drinks, and equipment. I know people who packed rear and front derailleurs. When I first raced, I packed an extra tire for each checkpoint in case I punctured and needed to replace it. I also included spare CO2 cartridges. For food, I had bottles ready to replace without refilling, as well as my favorite dried fruits. The second checkpoint is situated in a way that if you're riding for a long time or encounter any issues, you might end up riding to the finish at night. That's why I packed front and rear lights, photochromic glasses, warmer clothes, socks, gloves, a vest, a windbreaker, and a cap for the second checkpoint. It's important to have options and a plan B in case something happens. Checkpoints are very useful and essential for such races. In addition to the checkpoints on the Unbound route, there were also 2 so-called water oases, points where you could refill water bottles. They were located between checkpoints.
So these are some towns?
Overall, this year's Unbound only passed through 2 small towns where the checkpoints were located. Generally, the route goes through fields, and there are no shops around. The water oases were also located in small farming communities. There's only water available and nobody can assist you. Even if you drop your glasses, nobody can hand them to you because of the rules. These oases consist of large water tanks and many taps where you can fill your bottles, wash up, and even take a nap if needed. You can also clean your bike before continuing. I had 2 800-milliliter bottles and 1-liter bottle. So I carried 2 liters and 600 milliliters on my frame. Since the first checkpoint was quite far, 127 kilometers away, I also carried an 800 milliliter bottle in my pocket. This means I had almost 3.5 liters of liquid before the first checkpoint. The first water oasis was at the 60-kilometer mark, where you could stop and refill your water. But usually, racers aiming for a good time minimize their stops and don't stop at the first few close stops. If you stop, you fall behind the fast group you were riding with. If you're out for about 20 seconds, you might catch up, but if it's close to a minute, you lose your chances and will either look for another group or ride solo. So, I plan to carry 3.5 liters of liquid to the first checkpoint. This doesn't mean all water bottles. 3 bottles contained beta fuel, a carbohydrate powder from the SIS brand. Each bottle of beta fuel contains 90 grams of carbohydrates, enough for an hour as both fluid and food. It's a great 2-in-1 solution, and 1-liter bottle contained water with a bit of electrolyte to compensate for and replenish sweat losses. Overall, Unbound this year is considered by all observers and racers as the most epic race in the 15-year history of this event.
There was a good discussion about the mud section on Dylan Johnson's channel. What the organizers should have done: change the track or still ride the mud section because it's part of Unbound Gravel.
Yes, there was a plan B for the organizers, and they could have changed the route. It's very easy to make detours, shorten or add distance to any section. But the organizers didn't go for it. I was planning to ride the section in 11 hours, but it turned out to be almost 13 hours. And everyone who wanted to improve their results ended up worse by 1.5 hours precisely because of the mud section. And that's those who were lucky, because 25% of participants in all categories dropped out of the race. This is a very high and bad statistic for the race.
How did you account for this in terms of nutrition? This adds 2 hours that you may not have anticipated.
I always take extra food with me, and at the checkpoints I can add something. So it didn't really affect the nutrition aspect much. It was more reflected in the technical side of the race as well as the psychological side. The night before the race there was heavy rain. And when you ride a gravel race in the rain, it's wet and possibly cold. But technically not very difficult, because you ride on thin mud like water and regular puddles. And this year, the rain stopped around 3 in the morning. By the start of the race, the track had already started to dry out. And at the 12th kilometer, there was a 5-kilometer stretch of road without gravel and with dirt and soil. All this dirt, as it started to dry out, turned into what Americans call peanut butter, which is very sticky, and wheels turned into fat bike wheels in just a few meters, literally before your eyes. The entire transmission was getting clogged up. People were ripping off their rear derailleurs when they got jammed. Frames were breaking, hangers were snapping, and everyone was suffering from the mud. Most people were walking, and those who went further than me, as I saw from the logs, spent more than an hour on this 5-kilometer stretch. They simply walked with their bikes. Firstly, this way the bike didn't get clogged with dirt. And secondly, there was no other option because when everyone is walking, there's no room for you to ride through. I encountered this section in the front rows of riders, and many people went off onto the shoulder. The shoulder was 1.5 meters of tall grass, followed by a fence and barbed wire protecting the track from the prairies where cattle graze. So, there were no Lanzug special conditions for bypassing. To clean the bike at the end of this section, according to Strava, I spent 13 minutes just sitting on the shoulder and cleaning the bike.
So how it was? Did you ride on the mud, went through some section, and then rode along the shoulder?
I didn't walk at all. I went onto the shoulder and we rode along the shoulder, switching from one side to the other. Because when you're riding in a group, you have to act as the group does.
So you were riding? You weren't walking?
We rode almost the entire section along the shoulder. But the shoulder had very tall grass that wrapped around the wheels, derailleur rollers, cranks, and pedals. In such conditions, it wasn't possible to ride all the time, and there were moments when we walked for 10, 20 meters. Mud stuck to our shoes, making them look like space boots. As this section was ending, the entire group split into smaller groups. Unbound Gravel is a tactical road race. A large group of people rides together, working in a circle and operating as a team. But at that moment, at the 12th kilometer, the group broke up into smaller groups and individual riders who still had over 300 kilometers ahead. This meant that, although the race was far from over, the tactics of the race had already changed. This meant lower speeds and higher energy consumption. There were plenty of moments that worsened endurance and extended the time on the distance. Another issue was that when you exit this section, all the drivetrain components dry up due to sand and mud. There's no lubricant left on the chain, and you have to ride over 100 kilometers to the first checkpoint at the 127th kilometer with a squeaky bike.
Did you do anything?
From my experience, I knew I should have a small bottle of lubricant with me. But I didn't dare to lubricate on the go. And I didn't want to stop because I was in a good group of 10, 12 people, and we were riding quite fast. And everyone was in the same situation. When you look at the chain, and it's shining like a mirror, you lubricated it before the race to last for 1,000 kilometers, and now it's already polished. Everything squeaks. And you don't know if it's the end of the bike or if it will make it. And only at the first checkpoint did they lubricate the chain for me and clean the bike a little. Not only did this dirty section become the biggest challenge, but for most people it ended around 10 o'clock in the morning. Then the real heat began. I'm not particularly afraid of heat. For me, it's even better than cold. But when you're riding in 39 degrees heat in the prairies and steppes without any trees or shade, you start to melt like cheese. The speed drops drastically. I saw people sitting on the sidelines and passing by where the ambulances quickly. Probably some had heat strokes. These were extreme conditions, and they lasted for about 180 kilometers. I talked about the dirty section. Let's call this one the heat section. And then I see a clear boundary between light and shadow. Somewhere about 1 kilometer away from me, there's a distinct line where darkness begins. When I rode there, the temperature dropped by about 15 degrees. It became easier to ride, and then the rain started, which turned into a hurricane after 15 kilometers. Even with this rim depth, the wind was carrying me from side to side. And it wasn't just wind, it was a heavy downpour and strong wind. You're being tossed around the road, and you're riding alone because visibility is limited to 20-30 meters. Then I thought, if there's a puncture, there's no bush around where I could hide and repair the tire or put in a new tube. So you're riding in a desert with a road, grass, and a storm and darkness all around. And this wasn't at night, but in the middle of the day. This stretch of the distance lasted about an hour. But because of this temperature contrast, it felt great to ride. It was, as athletes say, a second wind. I picked up speed and enjoyed the rest of the distance, although there was still about 100 kilometers left, since the second checkpoint was 60 kilometers from the finish. Later, I arrived at the second checkpoint, for which I had prepared warmer clothing, food, and glasses. I changed my glasses, put on a vest in case of rain, and took food and caffeine gels. I never ended up using the caffeine before the finish because I felt fine, and caffeine is such a thing that can help on one hand, but exhaust the body and cause cramps, which you'll suffer from until the finish. And so I set off on the final stretch, which was about 60 kilometers long. 10 kilometers later, an unfortunate incident occurred. A small stone flew from under the wheel and jammed the rear derailleur. I couldn't do anything while riding, so I had to disassemble the rear derailleur. It took me about 6 minutes, judging from Strava. During this time, many people overtook me, whom I had overtaken before, but then, when I fixed everything, I caught up with them again. As I approached the town of Emporia, the rain started again, but it was weak, and riding on wet gravel was quite comfortable without any problems. I reached the finish line. The finish line for Unbound is on the central street of Emporia called Commercial Street. It is fenced off with barriers, banners, and you ride into this corridor. Emporia is a small town, 25,000 residents. For such towns, this event may be one of the biggest of the year, and the whole city gathers near the finish line. A crowd of people gathers, there are bells ringing and music playing, and this lifts the spirits even if you're arriving half dead. Everyone has chips, so the organizers know who is approaching the finish line, and they announce your name and country in advance.
Regarding equipment and the bike,
when it comes to choosing components and accessories for such races, you have to be very meticulous. You can't get any help from outside. The equipment must be as reliable as possible. Even if something happens, you must have tools with you to repair the bike as quickly as possible, because otherwise the only option is to drop out of the race.
you rode a giant Revolt.
I rode a Giant Revolt Advanced Pro bike. Here's the frame. And on Cadex wheels and Cadex tires. The choice of tires and pressure is a very important matter that cyclists pay a lot of attention to. I already know what kind of terrain to expect on the Unbound Gravel course in similar races. I chose semi-slick tires, and most people were riding various variations of semi-slick tires. And this year, the most popular tire size was 40 millimeter. I noticed this both among the riders at the start and finish, and also at the expo, because before the race, there's a big expo where almost all the world's brands sell tires. And at the beginning of this expo, which takes place 2 to 3 days before the race, you can see all kinds of tires, but closer to the race, the 40 millimeter tires disappeared from all brands and in all tread patterns. Because of this, I understood that my choice was correct and matched the choice of most people. 40 millimeter semi-slick tires are the best tires for these conditions.
What width and pressure did you use?
I pumped to 32 psi, which is approximately 2 atmospheres, both the front and rear wheels. But it's important to note that in such a long race on tubeless tires, the pressure can change. Simply because of the length of the race, because when you ride for half a day, the pressure can drop by half an atmosphere or less towards the end of the race. So it's better to check at the checkpoints and, if possible, inflate the tires to the required pressure. I had almost no issues. Only in the middle of the race, I hit a pothole with my rear wheel, and I felt the moment when I hit it. There were no punctures, but the pressure dropped, and I realized that I damaged the tire's casing. Wherever I could inflate the tire, I pumped to 40 psi and above. At that point, you no longer pay attention to it and just want to finish safely.
Is that on hookless wheels?
Yes, those are hookless wheels. The wheel remained intact. No spokes were broken. The rims are intact. There was only a small issue with the tire, but now it's holding up and working fine because later I added some sealant and it fixed everything. That's about the wheels and tires. As for the group set, I've been choosing only electronic for a long time. I have Shimano GRX Di2 installed. I ride with a 2x11 gearing setup. This allows me to use a wider range of gears. Also, I really don't like big jumps on the rear cassette. And the combination of 2x11 allows me to have, for example, an 11-32 cassette at the back. When I need to ride fast, I can shift through gears smoothly. And for steep hills, it's also sufficient.
And what about the front?
Up front, it's 50-34. I don't ride with traditional gravel chain rings. I opt for compact road chain rings. With this setup of 50-34 in the front and 11-32 at the back, I find it completely sufficient for these races.
What lubricant choice do you use for the chain? Wax or oil?
No, I don't use wax. My choice is grease lubricants. And in this race, when you encounter such heavy rain and mud, I can't even imagine how wax would work. It probably gets washed away. When there's time and a place to lubricate the chain, you don't just drip a few drops, you pour the chain with grease. And when the entire chain is covered in thick grease and it gets washed off in 10 kilometers, I don't even want to think about what happens with wax. That's why I prefer grease lubricants. The only issue with grease is that when you ride on dry and dusty roads, the dust sticks to the chain and dries it out very quickly. That's why you need to carry spare lubricant.
So you can lubricate the chain between checkpoints?
Yes, for example, at water oases. It's never superfluous because it increases efficiency, not to mention reducing noise, even if the specifications indicate several hundred kilometers. It's good if it lasts at least 100.
What about bottles and water?
Most riders use different hydration systems like camelbacks, meaning various backpacks with hydration systems. I don't really like having something bouncing on my back and sloshing in my ear, so I found a different system for myself a long time ago. It's a small South African brand called Line Components. They make such a cool design that allows you to mount 3 bottles on almost any bike. They hold quite securely and reliably, always within reach. You can use different size bottles with this system. I've been using this setup for 4 or 5 years since my first gravel race. I immediately realized that it's better to carry bottles in this large triangle than to use the lower bolts. You can attach tools or spare items there because all the dirt flies onto this bottle. If you ride in a group, stones fly out and hit your glasses, helmet, and cranks.
Did you do anything to dampen vibrations and impacts on a rigid bike without suspension?
I don't do anything special. I've long understood that tires and the rider's body position are the most important factors for counteracting vibration. Everything else might soften things a bit, but it also disrupts the kinematics of your body's movement on the bike. That's why I don't use any special equipment like double wraps or saddles with built-in suspension. I do use 3mm handlebar tape though. For races like Unbound Gravel, I wear short-fingered gloves, but without gel inserts, just to avoid chafing. They're not for damping or reducing vibration. A road racing saddle and regular cycling shorts are enough for me because it's not a race over rough terrain where the bike is constantly moving beneath you. Once I rode on a rocky trail and ended up with blisters. If the trail is flatter, even if it's gravel, and you don't need to make hand movements, you can ride comfortably even with bare hands.
What about your tools and repair kit? What did you have to resort to?
I brought along a pump that has a dual function. This hose can be used both as a pump and as an adapter for CO2 cartridges. It's very convenient because you carry fewer items with you and everything is at hand. The pump is used in emergency situations. Typically, for such a race, I bring 4 CO2 cartridges. There were also spare cartridges at the checkpoints that I could have replaced if I had used up the previous ones. Here's such a bag that quickly opens up, giving you access to all the items. Spare inner tubes weren't needed. There are 3 inner tubes here, but they weigh only 20-30 grams each, so they don't burden much in terms of weight. This set includes keys along with a chain extractor. The chain extractor may be needed if the rear derailleur breaks. You can convert the bike to single speed and continue the race. I didn't need it, but it should always be with you, just like the set of all the keys that are on the bike. I used this when my rear derailleur got jammed, and I had to unscrew it to remove the rollers and perform maintenance on the pulley that got stuck. These are patches in case I put on a tube and puncture it. If there's a large cut on the tire, you can insert something inside to put the tube and keep riding. These are CO2 cartridges. One cartridge is on the bike and the others are in this pouch. This is a key that combines several tools. Firstly, it's a tire lever. It's also a chain tool. You can also add spare chain links. And this bolt here is the same as those on the cranks, so if necessary, it can be replaced. There are various systems for quickly repairing punctures on tubeless tires. I chose Dynaplug. Unlike regular plugs, it's always ready to use. As soon as you remove the cap, you can insert it into the hole, you pull out the tool, and there's a plug ready to go. It's always prepared for immediate use. All the plug systems require time to prepare and insert the plug. Some riders use plugs and pre-prepared tools attached to their frames or jerseys, but they often get covered in dust and dirt. Dynaplug is the most convenient option. Here are spare cartridges for Dynaplug for larger and smaller punctures. I didn't need to use them.
No punctures?
No, there were no punctures during this race. This is the set of tools that I had in this bag. There were also spare gels and a bottle of lubricant, as well as a spare hanger for the rear derailleur. With this set, I can assemble and disassemble the bike, not just repair it.
What is the cost of such a trip and participation in the race? How much time does it take?
Well, I flew from Warsaw to Newark and from Newark to Kansas City. From Kansas City, it's a 200-kilometer drive to Emporia. If you're traveling from Europe, it's better to plan for 3 to 4 days. or even a week. This allows you to adapt to the climate and time zones. There's a 7-hour difference with Europe. Generally, it's recommended to allocate 1 day for each hour of time difference to recover properly. So I would say a week would be best. Plus, you can ride these roads and get to know the course. Also, closer to the race, there's an expo where you can meet many people and socialize.
So, it's the plane plus the road to Emporia.
At Kansas City Airport, you'll need to rent a car. The 200-kilometer drive isn't much. There are big problems with hotels there because the city is small. From my previous experience, I found that hotels tend to appear closer to the race. At first, they're all booked up. But closer to the race, for some reason, people cancel their hotel reservations. About a month or 3 weeks before the race, you can search on Booking or Airbnb and hotels become available. It's tough to stay 100 kilometers away from the event. The race starts very early and you'll get little sleep to make it to the starting line. Sleeping in the car depends on the weather. It can be very hot, as it was the first time I went. Temperatures stayed below 30 degrees. Then I don't know how to race after sleeping in the car. The main expenses are the plane, car, and a week's accommodation. Hotels, even in small towns, are not cheap from a European perspective. Approximately $8,100 per night. It's the kind of hotel we see in movies. Not luxurious, but decent conditions for living. Then there are expenses related to participating in the race. The entry fee was about $240. I opted for the services provided at the checkpoints by the organizers, which cost $80. Also, some might be interested in the full-scale expo before the race. There you can buy something interesting, like souvenirs or clothing.
Did you bring food with you? Or did you look for it there?
In general, in such races, you should eat what you're used to and what you've been eating during training. Because experiments in such races can backfire. It's not always possible to buy the brands and products you're accustomed to. For example, I really like SIS and Nutrend. These are our European brands. Nutrend, it seems, is not sold in America, and SIS is not available in the entire range. So you have to pack about 1.5 kilograms of gels to bring to America. It's not a big expense, and you'll be reassured that everything is okay with your nutrition. The effect after this race is very interesting. For the rest of the season, any distance won't scare you. If you're told that you have to ride 200 kilometers in a month, it's not a problem. Psychologically, it's not a barrier for you. I remember this from my first participation. 2 years ago, I dreamed that when I turned 55, I would try this race again. And when the war started, this dream disappeared for me. I don't feel the need to dream about any races and make plans in this situation. This year I had such an opportunity, and it was thanks to my family and the successful actions of the Ukrainian armed forces. And it's good that it turned out that way. What will happen in the near future is difficult to predict. But Unbound Gravel is a race that can inspire future participation, or it can destroy the desire to participate. It really depends on the individual. Perhaps one should try if there is an opportunity, because the devil is not as black as he is painted, and one can prepare for everything. But such races require more time to prepare. 1 or 2 months will not be enough. You need to already have some base and additionally spend time to ride this race properly. I believe that from every event in which you participate, you should derive pleasure. Pleasure is not only in easy adventures. Through suffering, you also get pleasure. And cycling is such a sport. For example, climbing up. People suffer from it regardless of their level of preparation. Reaching the top is suffering, but at the same time, it's also enjoyment.